You're 7 years old. Your father places a wooden sword in your hands. Not a toy, not a practice tool, a test. He doesn't say good job. He doesn't say I'm proud of you. He says, again. You swing until your palms bleed. You swing until your arms shake. You swing because the alternative, being soft, being weak, being forgettable, is worse than any bruise he could give you. And here's the question nobody asks about legends. What does it do to a child when love sounds like an order? When every lesson is a scar? When the only praise you ever receive is the absence of punishment? What kind of man rises from that forge? Not a warrior. A weapon. And by the time you're 13, that weapon has a name. A name the samurai of Japan will learn the hard way. If you want to walk the path with him, from that muddy village to the cave where he finally laid down his sword, hit subscribe now. Not because I need the numbers, but because you felt that, didn't you? That stillness, that weight. That's not just history, that's instruction. And if you're ready to receive it, then let's begin. You don't remember your mother's face. You've tried. In the quiet moments, between drills, between bruises, between the endless repetitions of the same cuts your father demands until your arms scream and your vision blurs. You've reached back into that dark place before memory hardens into armor. But there's nothing there, just the cold. Just the wind finding its way through gaps in the wall, whistling low and mean, like it's searching for something soft to punish. What you do remember is his shadow. Munisai didn't enter a room, he filled it. The weight of him arrived before his foot crossed the threshold, that particular stillness, that particular silence. Other children knew their fathers by voice, by laugh, by the rough warmth of a hand placed gently on a head. You knew yours by the sound of a sheathed sword tapping against the doorframe, by the way the air changed. Like the moment before a storm decides whether to break. He never said he loved you. You're not sure he knew the word. What he knew was this: the world is not kind. The world does not care if your hands hurt. The world does not pause while you cry. The world will eat you whole the moment you show the soft underside of your throat. And his job, his only job, was to make sure that when the world came for his son, it would choke. So he forged you. Not like a father teaches a son, like a smith teaches steel. Heat, hammer, repeat. Heat, hammer, repeat. No explanation, no encouragement. Just the work. Just the blade. Just you, 7 years old, clutching a wooden sword heavier than your entire will to live, and him standing over you with that stillness that asked nothing and demanded everything. Again. Your palms split. Blood seeps between your fingers, warm and sticky. You adjust your grip. The wound reopens. Again. Your shoulders catch fire. Your knees buckle. You can't breathe. You can't think. You can't remember why this matters. Only that if you stop, if you put the sword down, he will still be standing there, and his silence will be worse than any blow. Again. You don't cry, not because you're brave, because you learned early that crying changes nothing. It doesn't summon comfort. It doesn't pause the drill. It just makes your face wet and your grip slippery and your father's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, the closest he ever came to disappointment. So you stop. You stop crying. You stop waiting for praise that will never arrive. You stop hoping he'll one day kneel to your height and tell you you're enough. You just swing and swing and swing until the sword becomes an extension of your skeleton, until the motion lives in your marrow, until there is no difference between your will and the blade's edge. And somewhere in that long, brutal, love-starved dark, You understand something most children never have to understand. He is not trying to make you happy. He is trying to make you survive. Other boys dream of festivals, of girls giggling behind painted fans, of sweet rice and warm bedding. You dream of angles, of the exact degree at which a parry becomes a kill, of the rhythm between heartbeats, the gap between inhale and exhale, that tiny sliver of time where a man is most vulnerable. You dream of the precise moment when hesitation ends and death begins. And when you wake, sweating in the cold dawn, your father is already standing in the doorway. His sword is at his hip. His eyes are on yours. He doesn't ask if you slept well. He doesn't ask if you're hungry. He asks, "Ready?" And you, who have never been held, never been praised, never been told you are loved, you nod. Because the only language he ever taught you is the one you now speak fluently. The language of steel. The language of silence. The language of a boy becoming a blade, whether he wanted to or not. And somewhere, in a village not far away, a traveling samurai is oiling his sword, practicing his stance, and wondering where his next challenge will come from. He has no idea you exist. He will. He arrives on a Tuesday. You know this because the village elder mentions it at breakfast. Samurai, proper armor, real swords, asterisk, and the rice turns to ash in your mouth. Not fear. Something else. Something that has been coiling in your chest since the day your father first placed a wooden sword in your bleeding hands and said again. Arima Kihei. His name travels through the village like fire through dry grass. He's from a reputable school. He carries himself like a man who has never been refused. His sword is polished. His stance is perfect. His reputation precedes him by 3 full strides. He doesn't look at you. Why would he? You're 13. You're standing at the edge of the crowd with dirt on your knees and a practice sword tucked behind your back like a secret shame. Your hair hasn't been cut in months. Your clothes smell like smoke. You are, to his trained eye, exactly nothing. And that nothingness is the most dangerous thing you could possibly be. Because Kihei expects ceremony. He expects a formal challenge, delivered with proper bows, recited in proper language, witnessed by proper authorities. He expects the machinery of honor to grind into motion before any blade is drawn. You don't know the machinery of honor. You only know the gap. The space between a man's confidence and his reflexes. The lag between what is this and oh God. The microsecond when a samurai's brain tries to reconcile the sight of a feral child stepping forward with the reality of that child's wooden sword already mid-swing. You don't bow. You don't announce your name. You don't wait for him to finish smirking. You just move. The crowd gasps. Someone drops a basket. A woman screams, not for you, at you, like you're the one committing the atrocity. And maybe you are. Maybe there's something profane about a boy this young moving this fast, this certain, this hungry. Kihei's sword clears its sheath. Too late. You're already inside his guard. Already inside the geometry he spent 20 years perfecting. Already somewhere his school never taught him to defend, because no one is supposed to be here. Your wooden sword crashes against his temple. Not elegant, not artistic, just heavy, fast, and utterly final. He crumples, not like a warrior. Like a sack of rice slipped from a merchant's shoulder. His polished sword spins across the dirt. His perfect hair tangles in the dust. His reputation, that careful architecture of victories and vanities, collapses in a single undignified heap. Silence. The village holds its breath. The elder stares at you like you've just set fire to the shrine. Kihei's retainers stand frozen, uncertain whether to draw their weapons or pretend they were never here. And you? You look down at the man on the ground, at the blood seeping from his hairline, at his fingers still twitching toward a sword hilt they can no longer reach. You feel nothing. No triumph, no regret, no revelation. Just the quiet confirmation of something you've suspected since you were 7 years old. This is what I was made for. Stock. You turn your back on the crowd, on the retainers, on the legacy of Arima Kihei, which ends here, in this dusty village, at the hands of a barefoot boy with splinters in his grip. Your father is watching from the edge of the road. He doesn't smile, he doesn't nod. But his jaw, that hard, unforgiving hinge, softens just slightly. And you realize you didn't win this duel for yourself. You won it to prove his silence wasn't cruelty. You won it to prove the hammer was right about the steel. And somewhere, in a dojo you've never seen, a master you've never met is hearing your name for the first time. He laughs. He thinks the story must be exaggerated. He's wrong. But he won't know that until he's standing exactly where Kihei is standing now, flat on his back, staring at the sky, wondering what the hell just hit him. And you? You're already on the road. Stories. 13 years old. 1 victory. 1,000 miles of dust ahead. Car sticks. You don't know it yet, but you're not walking away from the village. You're walking towards your real education, and the tuition is blood. Kyoto does not know what to do with you. The city is silk and ceremony, whispered poetry and perfumed sleeves. Its warriors polish their armor until they can see their own reverence reflected back. Its streets smell of incense and ambition. Its dojos have produced generations of swordsmen who never once slept in a ditch or sharpened their blades on a river stone. And then you arrive. Mud on your sandals, leaves in your hair, a look in your eyes that says, I am not asking permission. They laugh at first, the shopkeepers, the students, the masters who hear rumors of some wild ronin wandering their perfect streets. They laugh because you are everything they train themselves not to be: unpolished, unattached, unwelcome. They laugh because laughter is easier than admitting that something about your stillness makes their tea taste like ash. The Yoshoka school does not laugh. They have heard the stories. The boy who killed a samurai at 13. The wanderer who fights with 2 swords because one apparently isn't arrogant enough. They have heard, and they have dismissed, because the Yoshoka have been the Yoshoka for 3 generations, and you are just another stray dog scratching at their gate. Seijuro accepts your challenge because refusing would imply fear. He does not fear you. He fears the whisper campaign if he lets a dirty ronin walk away unchallenged. He fears the younger students watching, wondering if their master still has teeth. He fears reputation more than he fears death, which is, you will soon demonstrate, a fatal prioritization. The duel is arranged, formal, proper. Witnesses in clean robes, betting quietly among themselves. Seijuro arrives in armor that cost more than your entire village. His stance is textbook. His breathing is measured. His sword sings as it leaves the sheath. You are holding a wooden blade carved from an old oar. Someone snickers. Then you move. Not fast. That implies a beginning and an end. You simply arrive. Inside his guard. Inside the space he believed belonged only to him. Your wooden sword finds the gap between his helmet and his collarbone. Not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to announce. I could have. Seijuro freezes. His perfect stance crumbles. His sword lowers, not by choice, but by the sudden terrible realization that he was never in control of this fight. He retreats. Not a step, a collapse. The Yoshoka school has just lost its head, and the head is still breathing. You don't gloat, you don't bow. You turn and walk away, and the crowd parts like water before a blade. No one laughs now. No one bets. No one meets your eyes. They send the brother next. Denshichiro is angrier than Seijuro. Less polished. More dangerous in the way a wounded boar is more dangerous than a hunter. He doesn't want to win. He wants to erase. He charges with rage instead of strategy, with vengeance instead of vision. You wait. His sword arcs toward your neck. You step left. His momentum carries him past you, off balance, open. Your wooden blade taps the back of his knee, not hard, just suggestive, and he crumples like a puppet with cut strings. 2 brothers, 2 hours, 200 years of Yoshoka tradition, reduced to 2 men on the ground, gasping, humiliated, undone. Kyoto stops laughing. Kyoto locks its doors at night. Kyoto whispers your name like a prayer and a curse in the same breath. And the Yoshoka, proud, ancient, desperate, make their final decision. They will not fight you with honor. They will not fight you at all. They will remove you. A boy. A child. The last remaining heir, barely old enough to hold a katana, positioned in an open field like bait, and hidden in the tall grass, 40 armed men, swords drawn, breathing slow, waiting for your back to turn. It is, objectively, a good plan. It fails because you are not a man. Men have expectations. Men have assumptions. Men believe that honor matters, that tradition protects, that certain lines will not be crossed. You cross those lines before you could walk. You arrive early. Not early enough to avoid the trap, early enough to use it. The boy sees you coming. His eyes widen. His hand trembles on his sword hilt. Behind him, in the grass, you hear 40 men shift their weight, ready to spring. You don't give them the chance. 1 strike. Clean, final, merciful. The boy falls. The grass explodes with armored men, shouting, charging, swords hungry for your blood. And you, outnumbered, surrounded, officially doomed, do something none of them expected. You smile. Not cruelty, not madness. Recognition, because you have been outnumbered your whole life, by your father's expectations, by the world's indifference, by every man who looked at a scrawny, dirty, motherless child and saw an easy victim. 40 swords is just Tuesday. You move through them like water through reeds, not fighting, rearranging task. A wrist here, a knee there, the precise angle of a neck, meeting the precise weight of your wooden blade. You don't kill. You don't need to. You just demonstrate. When it's over, the field is littered with groaning men. Swords lie abandoned in the grass. The Yoshoka school has no heirs, no honor, and no future. And you are already on the road again. Not because you're running. Because Kyoto just became too small to hold you. And somewhere, on an island you've never seen, a man with a sword longer than your entire life is practicing a technique called the swallow cut. He has heard your name. He is not afraid. Yet, he has heard your name. Sasaki Kojiro. The swordsman they whisper about in dojos, too afraid to speak yours. His blade is longer than any you have faced, a monstrosity of tempered steel, called the monohoshizao, the drying pole, So named because looking at it makes men think of ships and execution and things too large to defend against ents. His technique is called the swallow cut. Legend says he can strike from angles that don't exist, that his blade moves not forward but sideways, like the bird it's named for, slicing wings mid-flight, severing arrows from the air. Legend says he has never bled, never doubted, never looked at an opponent and seen anything but a future corpse kneeling at his feet. You have heard all of this. You have heard it and you have filed it away, not as fear, not as intimidation, but as data. Because fear is a poison, and you stopped drinking poison the day you walked out of your father's shadow and realized the world was just a larger dojo with sharper consequences. Kojiro does not fear you either. This is what makes him dangerous. The others, Kihei, Seijuro, the Yoshoka assassins hiding in the grass, they all carried doubt like a hidden wound. They saw your wild hair, your muddy feet, your complete and utter refusal to perform the rituals they spent lifetimes perfecting, and somewhere beneath their confidence, a small voice whispered, "What if this is real?" Kojiro has no such voice. He has spent decades becoming exactly what he is. His stance is immaculate. His reputation is iron. His sword is longer than your entire childhood, and he wields it not like a weapon, but like a birthright. When the challenge reaches him, carried by nervous messengers who can barely meet his eyes, he does not hesitate. He does not strategize. He simply nods once and begins the preparations. Ganryūjima. A small island in the Kanmon Straits, flat enough for clean footing, remote enough for privacy, dramatic enough that poets will spend centuries trying to describe what is about to happen. Kojiro arrives early. His robes are pressed, his hair is bound, his sword, that absurd, elegant, terrifying length of steel, rests across his knees as he meditates on the beach, breathing in salt air, utterly convinced that he is about to add another name to his list of victories. You arrive late. Not because you were lost, not because you were afraid, because you understand something Kojiro never learned in his pristine dojo with his perfect students and his flawless technique. Certainty is a cage. A man who knows he will win has already lost, because he has stopped asking questions, stopped adapting, stopped treating each duel as a unique conversation between two minds, two histories, two desperate hungers. He sees what he expects to see. You arrive carrying a wooden sword carved from a boat oar. The witnesses gasp, some laugh, the same nervous laughter you heard in Kyoto, in every dojo, on every road leading here. A wooden sword, against the drying pole, against the swallow cut. Kojiro's lip curls. Not fear, disgust. And in that moment, you have already won. Because disgust is slower than doubt, slower than caution, slower than the split second it takes his brain to process that you are not armed with wood, you are armed with intent. You do not wait for formalities. You do not bow. You do not announce yourself. You do not give him time to remember that every man who underestimated you is now a footnote in someone else's story. You move. Not toward his sword, toward his certainty, toward the space between his conviction and his reflexes, that tiny gap you have been exploiting since you were 7 years old, and your father said again. Your wooden sword rises. Kojiro's blade begins its arc, that legendary swallow strike, practiced 10,000 times, faster than sight, faster than thought. It doesn't matter. You are already inside, already past, already somewhere his technique was never designed to reach. The sound is not dramatic, not the clash of legends meeting. Just wood against bone, wet and final. A sound that makes the witnesses flinch and the gulls scream and the ocean itself seem to hold its breath. Kojiro falls. His sword, that magnificent, ridiculous weapon, spins across the sand, coming to rest against a rock, useless, orphaned, a relic before its time. He looks up at you. Not with hatred, not with rage. With Taigen. Because he did everything right. He trained, he perfected, he believed, and it still wasn't enough. You look down at him, breathing steady, heart calm, wooden sword still raised. And for the first time in your life, victory tastes like nothing at all. Because he was the last mirror. The only man left who could show you who you really are. And now the mirror is shattered, and all you can see is the long, empty road ahead, stretching toward a horizon that no longer holds any challenges. You sheathe your sword. Asta. You walk toward the boat. Astist. Behind you, the island grows smaller and smaller and smaller, until it is just a speck on the water, a memory, a story someone else will tell. And somewhere, in a cave you have not yet found, a brush is waiting for you. Ink, dry and patient. A blank scroll. Your final opponent. You outlive everyone. Not through mercy, through mathematics. Every duel, every ambush, every man who looked at you and saw an easy death, they are all ash now, their names fading from lips that once whispered them in fear, and you are still walking. But the walking has changed. Your feet still find the road, but your eyes no longer scan the horizon for the next challenge. They drift inward, to the spaces between heartbeats, to the silence that follows your footsteps like a patient dog. You don't know when it happened. There was no revelation, no thunderbolt. Just a slow, quiet realization, arriving like morning mist. You don't want to fight anymore. Not because you're afraid of losing, because victory has become a habit, and habits are just tombs you haven't died in yet. Every man who bows before your sword, every dojo that closes its gates when you pass, every whispered Musashi spoken like a prayer against evil, they are not victories. They are repetitions. And repetition is the death of mastery. So you stop. Not dramatically. You don't announce retirement. You don't burn your swords or shave your head. You simply decline. The challenges arrive, by letter, by messenger, by young men desperate to etch their names onto your legend, and you meet them at the gate, look into their hungry eyes and say, "No, Tusk." They don't understand. They think you're mocking them. They think you're preserving your record, protecting your legacy. They cannot comprehend that you are, for the first time in your life, trying to protect something, not your reputation, not your streak. Because you know what lies at the end of their path. You've walked it, you've bled it. You've stood on the blood-dark sand of Ganryūjima and realized that the final opponent is not the man across from you. It's the emptiness waiting on the other side of his collapse. So you turn away. And you walk, slower now, toward the mountains. Riando. The name means *spirit rock cave, Stast. It is not a temple, not a monastery, just a wound in the mountainside, deep enough to hold one man, cold enough to remind him he is still alive. You sit. Days pass, weeks. The cave teaches you differently than the sword ever did. The dripping water, patient and relentless, carving stone not by force, but by persistence. The spiders, spinning their webs not to conquer, but to catch what sustains them. The silence, vast, ancient, indifferent to your reputation. You learn to sit in that silence. And one morning, you reach for something other than your sword. The brush is unfamiliar in your hand, heavier than you remember. Your fingers, calloused, scarred, shaped by decades of gripping death, fumble with its delicate shaft. The first strokes are disasters. Ink pools where it shouldn't. Lines wobble like a drunkard's walk. Your calligraphy looks like what happens when a child tries to capture thunder on paper. But you don't stop. Because you recognize this feeling, this clumsiness, this humiliating gap between intention and execution. This is the beginning of mastery. Days become weeks, weeks become months. Your brushstrokes find their discipline. Mountains rise from ink, rivers flow from your wrist. The same precision that guided your blade now guides your breath, and you realize, with the quiet shock of a man who has spent 40 years looking in the wrong direction, that the sword was never the point. The point was this: the stillness, the attention, the complete, unconditional presence in the present moment. The sword was just your first teacher. Now you are ready for the final lesson. You write. Not a memoir. Not a war manual. Not an apology or a justification or a plea for understanding. You write because the words have been gathering in you for decades, pressing against your ribs, demanding release. The Book of Five Rings. Our Stalag House. Earth, water, fire, wind, void. Not techniques, philosophies, not instructions, mirrors. You write for men you will never meet, for warriors not yet born, for the young Ronin sleeping under trees, wondering if the path of the sword leads anywhere but loneliness, for the father who never praised you, whose silence you finally understand was not cruelty, but the only language he knew, for the boy you were, still standing in that muddy village, hands bleeding, waiting for permission to become. You write for him. And when the final character dries on the final scroll, you set down your brush and realize you are not the same man who entered this cave. You are not even a man anymore. You are a question, written in ink and blood and 4 decades of hungry pursuit, waiting for someone bold enough to answer it. The seasons turn outside. You feel it in your bones, the cold deepening, your breath growing shallow, the distance between heartbeats stretching longer. Death is not an enemy approaching. It is an old friend, patient, waiting at the cave's mouth, unwilling to enter until you invite it. You dress simply. Clean clothes. No armor. Your swords rest beside you, not to fight, but to honor. They served you faithfully. They deserve to witness your final stillness. Your students gather outside. You hear their breathing, uneven, afraid. They think you are leaving them. You are not leaving. You are completing. You close your eyes. The mountain air fills your lungs, cool and sharp and alive. Somewhere, impossibly far, a bird cries. The cave's water continues its patient drip. The spiders continue their patient weave. And you simply stop. Not with struggle, not with regret. The way a river stops when it reaches the sea. The way a blade stops when it finds its sheath. Your hand, still resting on your katana, grows still. Your breath, steady for 70 years, takes its final leave. And somewhere, in a dojo you will never see, a young man picks up a wooden sword for the first time. His palms are soft. His stance is wrong. His master is watching, unsmiling, waiting. He has no idea that 4 centuries ago, in a cold cave on a lonely mountain, a dying warrior dipped his brush in ink and wrote a message meant specifically for him. Walk the path. Stark. Face yourself. Become more. The young man swings. And the sword, your sword, the one you forged from silence and suffering and stubborn, relentless will, sings again. Not because you are still here, because you never left.